Hi. Hey, thank you. It's me again. I had no idea I'd be on stage so much. I wrote a very short speech. I hope you'll excuse me. I wanted to write it down because I didn't trust myself to speak off the cuff. And I wanted to tell you two anecdotes that I hope will explain what this prize means to me. I came to the States about 10 years ago. It was before my daughter was in school, so I used to come for 6 months to New York to teach and then back to London again. And this one time I got off the plane at Heathrow very early in the morning, headed to Willesden, and reaching our house, I found it dusty and cold and silent, as houses are liable to be if you leave them long enough. And I put on the heating and the lights and the radio. I started tidying up. On the radio I could hear these 4 older white gentlemen having a conversation. And they sounded pretty learned, like they were experts in something. And they were having this learned conversation about who gets to be British, who in the final analysis is really British. And they spent a long time discussing this question, you know. And I'd filled the dishwasher, I'd done the towels and the bed linen, gone through all the open mail before they were done. But as I was passing a cloth over my kitchen table, they finally reached their conclusion. And it turned out you could only be truly British if 4 of your great-grandparents were born in Britain. And that was their expert view. And I sat down exhausted, and I just kind of started to laugh. It was a sort of crazy laugh, a mixture of laughter and tears, and if you'd heard it, you probably would have thought it sounded unhinged. I sat there in my old neighborhood, in my newish house, and I thought of all those years I'd spent as a child in England trying to prove that I was both black and British, that I knew their plays and poems and history, and I could get into their institutions of education, and I could perhaps even add a few words to the history of their literature, and that I too was England. But something turned in me that morning, and I realized I just really didn't care anymore, and the whole thing seemed totally absurd. And the British could argue amongst themselves about who was or wasn't British, but it just didn't matter to me any longer whether or not they included me in their narrow, claustrophobic self-definitions. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. But 6 months later, I flew back to New York, and one of the first things I did was visit that old Barnes & Noble on 6th Avenue that's been closed for about 5 years now because no one can afford to pay the rent on that space, not even Barnes & Noble. Anyway, I was browsing in there, in the African-American corner of the store, and I spotted a book of mine on beauty, sitting right in there, you know, after Miss Morrison, before Miss Walker. And I started to laugh, cry again. I thought, you know, look at this. In England, they're still trying to decide if a person like me is really English at all. And meanwhile, over in here in New York, I've been adopted. I'm in the wrong part of the bookstore, sitting with writers who've meant so much to me. And even though everybody probably knows it's not quite right, I'm still here on the shelf, kissing cousin, interloper, admirer from across the sea, and nobody's demanding to see my passport, and no one cares where my goddamn great-grandfather came from. Because in that corner of the bookstore, American wasn't the operative word. I think African was. And that's also, I think, when I came to America for the first time, I heard people call me sister in the street, sister in the supermarket, sister in the airport or the bar. I'd entered a broader consciousness in which national borders have less meaning. I was part of a historical and geographic diaspora that's penetrated every corner of the globe and which no single passport can contain or express. So receiving this prize makes me want to laugh, cry too, with pride and amazement. I don't know what I'm doing on a list of names that includes Baldwin and Morrison, Walcott, Butler, Edwidge, Dentacat, but I'm so grateful to find myself in their company. Growing up in England in the 80s, these were some of the writers my mother gave me to remind me that no country has the power to decide whether or not it will tolerate a black child or decide on her true identity. For a black child's inheritance is borderless and enormous and needs no such external authentication. And nor is it a monolith. At the root of blackness lies Africa, but from that rich soil spreads innumerable branches, each with its own character, style, struggles, and victories. A diaspora is always by definition e pluribus unum. And that which spread from Africa is uniquely flexible, able to fit into its oneness, a dazzling plurality that recognizes sibling relations across time and space, my sister, my brother. Despite all contrasts of history and nation, Langston Hughes is also my brother. He was a mixed-up sort of person, the kind I can relate to. He had black ancestry and white ancestry, Native American ancestry, Jewish ancestry. He had men in his life and women. He was a communist and a capitalist. He was a poet, playwright, novelist, a believer in the uptown working man, and a lover of downtown intellectuals. He was always conflicted. He could write of the eternal tom-tom beating in the Negro soul, and he could also write, I was a victim of stereotype. There were only 2 of us Negro kids in the whole class, and our English teacher was always stressing the importance of rhythm in poetry. Well, everyone knows except us that all Negroes have rhythm, so they elected me class poet. He expressed these kind of beautiful conflicts in everything he wrote. Are we truly a people of rhythm, or is all that a myth? Are we a people? Are middle-class Negroes still Negroes? What does it even mean to be a Negro? These are the kind of questions Langston asked himself, and he was beautifully inconsistent in his answers, being a poet and not a politician. But the thing I really love about Langston is his insistence from the very start that Black lives not only matter, but are beautiful, ugly, sad, happy, angry, joyful, and finally undefinable, because so complex and so various, just as white lives are understood to be. That's knowledge we need right now. In our present, it feels natural and necessary to reach back into the past for guidance. James Baldwin reminds us how to fight the threat we're facing, but Langston Hughes reminds us what we're fighting for, the freedom to be ourselves in all our variety. He put his arms around the whole diaspora, no matter how distant or mongrel, no matter how unlike we all may be in history or culture, and in this way inspired diaspora artists of every subsequent generation and all around the world. In Langston's worldview, Black siblinghood stretched the earth. And I'm so thankful tonight that it's stretched a little bit further to include a Black British woman like me, freckle-faced woman like me, a mixed marriage woman like me, a green card holder like me, an immigrant like me, a second-generation Jamaican like me, a distant but not forgotten daughter of Africa like me. Thank you. Thank you very much.